Hello, everyone. What's up, Kansas City? My name is Darrell Forte. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before we start this show. First of all, I want to thank God for giving me this opportunity and this platform. I want to thank Cascade Media, specifically Carlos Nelson, for giving me this platform to share some things about law enforcement. And I hope you tune in, and I hope you get something good out of this. Uh, I'm going to share some information about the police culture. I started my law enforcement career 37 years ago. And I'll tell you about, and what I plan to talk about today is from pre-employment, the application process, and all the way up until my fifth year in law enforcement. And then the next show is I'll go on and tell you some other things. I want to paint a picture. This show is be about 20, 25 minutes. I want to paint a picture about law enforcement and why we think the way we think and how we've been trained. I'll look away a little bit because I have some notes over to my left and right, and I want to make sure I cover some things. So, and if you have any questions about what I say today, call me at 816-492-1076, and I'll hopefully repeat that number again, 816-492-1076, and I plan to repeat it at the end of the show. But again, I want to thank God for this opportunity. I know you all are busy, so thank you for taking out the time to listen to this, and I want to build up on this show for future shows so I can tell you some more detailed information about the police culture. I initially applied for the police department when I was 20, 21 or so. I received a letter after my polygraph saying I was, they didn't tell me why, but they said I could never reapply for law enforcement at the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department again. I tried to contact them to get an answer. Of course, they would give you the generic answer. We can't tell you, but you just can't qualify again. I remember sitting down on my mom's living room floor with tears coming down my eyes thinking, what are they looking for? I don't smoke. I don't drink. This has been my whole goal in life, is become a law enforcement official. So I applied many organizations, even as far as Dallas, Texas. They had a 3-day process back then. But let me tell you what happens during the process, or what happened during the process and pre-process. I went through the first time. Of course, I was rejected. But even the second time when I came through, no one asked any questions about why I was rejected the first time. They were looking for blacks at the time because we had 6 blacks in my academy class, and only 2 of us retired from there. So that tells you something too. And of course, you know, the DOJ is investigating some things with the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. And they're a great organization. Most people in law enforcement are people that care. They want to be there, but we have some people that shouldn't be there. And I'll touch on that a little later on, maybe not in detail today, but future times. As I was applying for the police department the second time, I had some encounters with law enforcement, one at 43rd and Prospect, where they treated me rudely. Early in the morning, I was leaving a job that I worked nights. I was a check processor at Federal Reserve Bank, and I lived out south. But I'd get sleepy sometimes on the way home, and I got off about 2 o'clock regularly. And they pulled me over at the gas station, 43rd and Prospect. Pulled all the stuff out of my trunk. I mean, they were laughing and having a good time. I had tears in my eyes. Then I'm thinking, why do they have to do all this? They were being smart, and then they left. And I said, "You gonna put the stuff back in the trunk?" And I remember them saying, "Nope." One of the guys, I didn't remember him, but another guy I worked with later when I joined the police department, he too didn't get to retire from the police department. So, some of the bad guys are weeded out and some aren't. So again, I want to share information about the police culture. And I'll say this probably a couple of times. Most law enforcement officials want to do the right thing, and they do the right thing, but most is not good enough. I had my field training. I went to the academy in August 1985. And in January, we graduated at the end of December. And in January, I was placed with a field training officer. Great guy, no problems whatsoever. When I first got in the car with him, the first week of training, he talked about what happened to him. He was a person of color. He talked about what happened to him through his career. He went to investigative element, didn't last long, was kicked out for what he thought was no reason. So that was a little taste of some things. But let me back up real quick. In the academy, we had somebody that stood up in front of the class and said, women shouldn't be in law enforcement. Now, this is a guy that stood up in the class, and all they did was took him out in the hall and said, "Hey, you can't say those kind of things." He was not disciplined, not kicked out of the academy or anything like that. And he was, to me, was a decent guy, and he retired from the police department. Another thing that opened my eyes in the academy, we had physical training. And I knew my evaluation in the academy wasn't accurate, so I went to what they call a forum officer, and that's like another police officer, a permanent police officer that goes to the academy to instruct. And I told him that this wasn't accurate about my physical training. He agreed, and I told him, you're probably mixing me up with another black guy. He said, yeah, probably so. And I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, nothing. Nobody cares. That was another thing that started early on that kind of opened my eyes. I was 23 at the time. And then another thing in the academy where we had to do report writing. And I used to think, I was a pretty good writer. And I remember comparing my report with another, what they call a cadet when you're in the academy. And I had way more information in my report. It was a lot neater. It was handwritten back then, of course. And I had a lower grade. So I went to the person grading it and said, well, I had this in there. I had this and I had that. And her response is, I don't care. I'm not going to change anything. So that's opening my eyes. I'm coming into a law enforcement agency, not aware of the police culture. These same people are the same people that have been out in the field and we're going back out in the field to patrol our neighborhoods. So that's just giving you a little picture. And it's not the majority. I'm not painting a picture of the majority, but I'm telling you what we have to deal with internally. And if you talk to some people of color that's been there, they'll tell you some of the same things. We haven't been treated fairly in some cases. We haven't been treated fairly. And there's been some other people of that's not people of color that haven't been treated fairly. But I'm just talking about some of the things that we experienced. And we had very few people we could go to talk about this. So I knew early on I had to get in a position to make a difference. I had a sergeant tell me doing my evaluation, and this is when after I was off break-in period, that I was antisocial doing roll call because I didn't talk about drinking and I didn't go out with my sector mates. I didn't. I never, I wasn't a drinker, still not a drinker. And so I wasn't, roll call. I just wanted to go to roll call, get my assignment and head out to the field. So, but they put that in my evaluation, or he put it in my evaluation. That same sergeant, after he retired, years later, he put some things on social media talking about welfare recipients, Black welfare recipients. So I'm painting a picture. I work for another sergeant that told me I should have been an effing social worker, all because I wouldn't put a guy on the ground when it was wet because he was talking. He kept talking, saying crazy things. And I'm thinking, and I told the sergeant, I said, hey, I'm going to be at downtown at headquarters eating a sandwich in 30 minutes and he's going to be in jail. Let him stand up and talk. He's not kicking. He's not threatening, to do anything. He just talking, cursing and all that kind of stuff. So that was another sign. So I saw these things. So that's what motivated me to get promoted. And during my break-in period, we had a female that was on break-in, and I broke in on the day shift over at Linwood and Troost at the time. And she told me every day, Darrell, he keeps trying to get me in a fight. He keeps trying to get me in the fight. She graduated #1 in our class. Very bright, excellent interpersonal skills, and she quit. She said, this guy keeps trying to get me in a fight. So that's what I'm talking about. Some of the people that we deal with. So, and I'm going to talk about it. And some of those people got promoted. When I was a new officer, I heard a guy use the N-word. I said something to him and the other people around, and this is what they said. I didn't hear anything. First, the guy that said it said, I didn't say anything. And then he looks around and said, did anybody hear me say anything? Hey, no, we didn't hear anything. So I had dealings with that guy even before I got on the police department. He probably doesn't remember, and I didn't share with a whole lot of people, but I had dealings with him before where he was unfair. And this guy became a sergeant before he left the law enforcement. So what I'm saying, in law enforcement, we're a microcosm of society. So we can't say, and we have people say all the time, we don't see color, everybody's fair. Show me an incident where they're unfair. Racial profiling is real, because when you have people with the biases like that, they don't all of a sudden take an oath and all of a sudden start loving everybody and those biases go away. And sitting in an hour or 2 hour class is not going to erase those biases. There are going to be some other things that need to go with that to help eliminate or reduce some of those biases. Again, I'm looking away to look at some things. When I was a fairly new officer, I'd probably been on 2 or 3 years. They were chasing a suspect on foot. Several people were chasing a suspect on foot. A sergeant and a K-9 officer found him under a car. And I'm standing there, it was close to the station at 63rd and Paseo. And I'm coming down the street and I can tell they're standing there. They were doing this like, be quiet. We're going to let the dog go on him. I said something. I said, hey, come out. We know you're under the car. Come out. And they talked to me after that. The sergeant said, why did you do that? I said, why are you going to have the dog biting when you just give him a chance to come out? And that sergeant didn't retire from law enforcement. He got in trouble and had to leave suddenly, probably 3 or 4 years after that. So what I'm saying too is oftentimes some of these people are weeded out and other times they're not. And another thing, and I won't go into a whole bunch of things, and I'm not saying it's a pity party for me. I'm just trying to paint a picture of some of the things that happened for us. 75th and Prospect, on Saturday morning. I'm driving a Cadillac northbound on Prospect, and a guy turns around in the wagon, and he comes at me, and I turn on Meyer, stop, and I said, "Why'd you stop me?" He said, "Because you didn't use your turn signal." I said, "When?" I was going straight. He said, "When I stop you, when you turn over here, you didn't use your turn signal." I said, "What do you mean?" I was confused, and I was a police officer, but I worked the night shift, and he was on days at the same station. He just didn't know me. So he goes back to his wagon, he holds up the ticket book, and he says, and I get out of the car then. Of course, you shouldn't get out of the car. Officers will tell you to get back in for safety reasons. And I said, I'm a police officer too. And then he said, "Show me your credentials." And I showed him. And he said, "Why in the F didn't you tell me?" I said, "I shouldn't have to identify myself not to be treated like this." And to this day, I had a sweatsuit on, and I had a little cheap gold chain. I haven't worn a sweatsuit, and I haven't worn a gold chain since then. I don't do that anymore because I'm thinking I don't need the drama, and I'm 60 years old, and I still won't. So I can't imagine how some of those other things happen to people. I had another guy on the plaza, pre-employment, pull a button off my shirt. He pulled a button off my shirt. I said, "What'd you do that for?" And he said, "Well, you keep talking, you're gonna go to jail." I'm thinking I didn't do anything. So and I remembered his name. I worked with him before too, before he retired from the police department. So we have these incidents. So when people come to me and they talk about some of the things that are occurring in law enforcement, that's not self-induced, and it's hard to prove sometimes when people are racist or some of those things, but it's not hard to prove when people are unfair. And I gave you some of those examples. So I can assume some of these same people that are being unfair at the station, what they might be doing at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning out there in the urban core or even in other areas. So I'm just sharing this with you and saying I'm gonna build up on this, and I'm just telling you some things that happened to me, and they're not all the things. And I'm not a victim. I don't want you to think, "Oh, Darrell's up there talking about he's a victim." I'm not a victim. All of these things help make me who I am today. I don't regret it. I wouldn't erase anything that's happened to me because I think it's made me a better person. And I understand the people that we police, and I understand when they're coming in with an issue about a complaint, whether it be formal or informal. I understand where they're coming from, and I know some of the people that's been involved in some of these things. Let me see what else I can tell you about real quick. On break-in, and that's when I had the guy training me for the 3 months. I was chasing the guy, and he went around an apartment complex on the west side, and the sergeant told the field training officer to write me up for not stopping to look around the building before I caught the suspect. And the field training officer was right behind me. The sergeant was still in his car. He was kind of big and couldn't get out too quick. He just assumed because I caught the guy, I had to be reckless because if I would have stopped, I wouldn't have been able to catch the guy. And I told the field training officer, and he knew it. He said, "Well, let's not fight this. Things are going well for you. You don't want to aggravate him to make him do anything." So that stayed in my evaluation. It didn't hurt me anything, but that showed me too. If you aggravate somebody, they might come after you. And if we're in law enforcement and they talk about being brothers and sisters, if they come after you, what are they doing if you're not in law enforcement? And they say you cite them for whatever reason, speeding or a failure to stop at a red traffic control signal, and they go to court and the judge throws it out. Do they come back and come after you? Kind of like they would have came after me had I tried to make noise about I did stop and look around the corner before I chased the suspect. So I'm throwing these things to paint a picture, and I'll paint some probably broader pictures or bigger pictures, more specific pictures as I talk about as I rose to the rank as sergeant, captain, major, deputy chief, and even as chief, some of the things that I faced by I think that was racially motivated. So again, I'm not a victim. I'm just throwing some things out there, and what we've done, I think, in law enforcement, we failed to understand the community that we police. We failed to understand that community. We think we come in, we do our 10, 12 hours or whatever, and we go home and everything's okay. It's not. And that's where we're missing it. You can have 100 more police officers, 500 more police officers. If you don't have the right people policing our community, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. People don't want to talk to us. And you know when they stop talking to us? I figured it out when I was in homicide, when I was looking at the stats over the years. 1968, the race riots in Kansas City, Missouri, when they used canines to control crowds, when they used water hoses to control crowds. After 1968, the homicide number has mostly remained above 100. Prior to 1968, and they kept records since the 1920s, we never had homicides over 100. So that showed me when I was a homicide sergeant and captain, and I was the major over the violent crime division. That told me something, at least, and I don't know, if anybody else agrees with it or not. That told me that was a disconnect from some segments of our community to other segments of our community. So what I've done since then, I've been out in the community and I got attention, a lot of attention, a great deal of attention when I became chief, when I responded to homicide scenes. I've been responding to homicide scenes for years. For years, I've been putting placards on cars and door hangers on houses for years, but nobody really cared until I became chief. And I still go to some homicides now. Let me check something real quick. Sorry about that. I had a sergeant tell me four males on a car is a good car check. He didn't say black, but I knew what he meant. He said four, and that's not a good car check because somebody has a car is occupied by four males. But that's what he told me. I watched plenty of police officers cite people of color for walking in the street where sidewalks are provided. That was a common thing. It's basically contempt of cop. How dare you get smart with me? So I'll give you a ticket for walking in the street where sidewalks are provided. And then if you throw your cigarette butt down, I'll give you one for littering. Those are the kind of things that pushed us apart from other segments of the community. Let me see what else. I heard in the late 80s, early 90s, that the testing process to become a supervisor was changed to become a sergeant because there was a whole lot of people of color that was eligible at that time. So they pushed it back a couple of years. Thank God I made it to the next go around. But the year that I was initially eligible, based on the criteria, they changed that criteria at the last minute. Let me see. I think that's it for now. And like I said, I will get with you all next time, and I'm going to share some information from the time I became a sergeant and some of the things that I faced as a supervisor when I had some people of tenure that I had to supervisor all the way up until the time I was chief of police. So thank you for joining. I hope you connect next time. Remember, no one can beat you at being you. No one can beat you at being you. So just continue to contribute from where you sit. Before you start getting an opinion or forming an opinion about anything, get the information. And in closing, I want you to please support Cascade Media financially. This is a digital media platform that's needed in our community. We don't use it like we should. They have all sorts of media outlets out there, and I can tell you firsthand that some of the major media outlets, they don't report what's actually going on, and they get to edit and they get to talk about these things. Tune in, whether it's with me or someone else, and support this digital media outlet, Cascade Media, financially. Figure out what you can do to keep this media outlet going, because we need our own media outlet so we can come on and we can share accurate, unedited information. So thank you all, and I'll see you next time. Be safe.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.